Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name's Martina Devlin. I'm your host for tonight's event. It's great to be here in Dundalk, in the border region, where partition had a particular impact and the presence of two jurisdictions abutting each other posed challenges. The border was an imposed settlement a century ago, cobbled together by politicians and civil servants who are long dead. So the question for us is, do we want to continue with these arrangements, or is there a better way forward? A way that allows us to make the most of being various and incorrigibly plural, as Louis McGuinness has it. I'm on the board of Ireland's Future. We're a civic society group formed to ensure that people have a chance to listen, to reflect, to engage, and to ask questions about what could happen in a reimagined and agreed Ireland. We believe the ship is sailing steadily towards unity, but we also believe that, irrespective of preferences, people should be well informed. This is our 7th public meeting as part of Ireland's Future's island-wide conversation about unity, and that's an idea that's bigger than any one person in this room. By the way, speaking of events, I want to flag one that's coming up in October. It's at the Three Arena. It's going to be a monster event, a real gala day, up to 10,000 people there. It's on Saturday, the 1st of October, so put it in your diary. We'll be releasing tickets shortly. Come along, bring your family, bring your friends. It's a celebration. Now, to begin with, tonight's panel will look ahead and share their vision for a new Ireland, for the best possible future for this island, and how to achieve it. They're each going to open with a short statement. I'll ask some questions, and then it's over to you on the floor to ask questions yourselves or make a contribution. So first up, we have Fine Gael TD for Louth, Fergus O'Dowd. Fergus has had a long and distinguished career as a public representative, first as a councillor, then as a senator, and for the past 20 years in Dáil Éireann, where he's been Minister of State in the Department of Environment. He's currently chairperson of the Joint Committee on the Implementation of the Good Friday Agreement, and he's also chairperson of the Northern Ireland Fine Gael Engagement Group. Welcome, Fergus.
Gormagad Martina Zachtan Fáilte Sin is mór nó domsa bheith an seo aniuh ar a nacht chun caintliv ó heh cegur bhfuil de Fine Gael méid tá mé caint compársanta. I'm delighted to be here tonight. I thank you for your invitation. I just want to be honest with everybody here. And I suppose the last time I came here, I had to have police protection. Why? There was a big protest outside and I was a Minister of State. You never guess what it was about water charges at the time. So it was a bit of fun anyway. I got inside. But anyway, I'm just trying to get you all relaxed to enjoy yourselves and to learn as I learned today, listening to Francis Black, Senator Francis Black. We had a 3-hour meeting today with some of our key civil servants and political parties from the North, from Alliance, from the SDLP, from Sinn Féin, from Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, from Peadar Tóibín's party, and so on. And what we were talking about was the future for all of us, North and South. And as you put it correctly, what is the future going to be and what will it be like? And what can we do as politicians to make sure that we go that extra mile? What is our vision for change? What is our vision that we can sell? Can we reach out? Can we reach those people out there, particularly who mightn't agree with us? I'm a nationalist like most people here. I believe in United Ireland. I come from a family. My father married late in life, and 2 of his brothers actually fought in the War of Independence. And on my mother's side, she came from a different tradition. Her brother was killed, believe it or not, he was in the Royal Air Force on the very last day of the Second World War. He was shot down over Denmark. And so we come from, just like anybody else, we have a divided nation, we had different views in our family. And as we grew up, we learned the traditions, from both sides. And I suppose that the most important thing for me, the vision, is to reach out to those who, listen to us sometimes and don't on other times. The big vision that this country is working under right now is the Good Friday Agreement, and it's been 25 years. There's been huge progress made. The war is over, the guns have been decommissioned, there's nobody being killed on our streets. That's a huge bonus, and what we have to do, and Francis, we're talking about it today, was we have to find a way forward for everybody on this island that everybody can live with. And Francis and myself agreed on the point that you were making, that we need to examine what a future Ireland will look like, what it look like economically, politically, how can we improve our education system north and south, how can we look at our transport infrastructure, how can we deal with our health services. For instance, the challenge at the moment, as I understand it, is that there's an issue with Newry Hospital at the moment. Can we in the south help? Can they provide services for us that we don't have at the moment? And how do we make sense of our island as we go forward? How do we reach out? How do we make sure that we recognise, respect and understand that if you are from a unionist tradition, your right to have your Union Jack, to have your belief and to be a British citizen is your right and your privilege should you choose. Or if you're a nationalist, to have your green, white and gold. Or if you choose to be neither or both, that's your right and entitlement. And we have to build on this island a coalition of the willing. And notwithstanding the fact that we're in an election situation in the north at the moment, and I know that the drums are being beaten on particularly on one particular side, and we don't have an executive sitting at the moment, we don't have the appropriate north-south ministerial meetings. Lots of things wrong, but there's lots of good things too. So my message to you is this: our committee in the Oireachtas, we all work together, all the parties work together, and we're all focused on what the future will be. So I think I'm here to listen to what your views will be on that. But if I leave you at this moment, just for one thought, I mean, I had to represent the government at a funeral recently. It was very sad. A member of the Assembly, a Democratic Unionist Party member, died very suddenly and very sadly. And I went for the first time in my life into East Belfast, into a Presbyterian church. And I sat among the good and the great and all the people who were there and the families and so on. And I listened with just increasing wonder at I'm talking about religion and the depth of feeling and the unity I got in that church, and the fantastic singing, the commitment there was to the religion as they saw, to their God, the same God as a Catholic God, but in a different place. And I felt at home there in the context that this is a powerful tradition, the Presbyterian position historically. They're a powerful people, and we need to touch base with them. We need to listen to them, and we need to learn from them. And I suppose I was very privileged to be there, but I learned something there that I didn't learn before. That these people do care, they do believe. I know it's not beliefs that I have in terms of their politics, but we have to work together, and we have to share our country with them, and they have to share their views with us. And I suppose I'm happier to talk later on to answer questions. But look, I'm really pleased to be here, and what else can I say other than Jim? I don't know if Jim Darcy is here or not. Jim Darcy said he would be here later on. He's a Fine Gael. He was the advisor to Leo when he was Taoiseach the last time, and hopefully he'll be here later on. But look, thanks for listening to me, and I know we'll have more time to expand our views later on. Margaret.
Thank you for that, Fergus. I hope you sang along to the hymns. Anytime I've been in a Presbyterian church, you do have to sing along. Our next speaker is Senator Annie Hoey, a member of the Labour Party elected to Shannon Erin 2 years ago by the Agricultural Panel. Annie is her party's spokesperson on further and higher education, innovation, research and science. She's a member of the Oireachtas Health Committee, the Oireachtas Subcommittee on Mental Health and co-chair of the Oireachtas All-Party Sexual and Reproductive Rights. So we can see where your interests lie there, Annie. Annie's also a former president of the Union of Students in Ireland. So big hand for Senator Annie Hoey.
Thanks very much for having me here. I should also probably add in that I'm from Drogheda, so I'm from the other side of the county, but even more so than that, I'm from the Meath side of Drogheda, so I've really traversed things to go up here this evening. And thank you so much for having me here, and I've been watching these online and watching clips as they've been going along over the past couple of months, and I've just been really incredibly interested actually to listen and learn from other people about what their vision is, or how things could look. And I think from someone who works in a legislative area, even though it feels weird to say, I'm a politician, I'm more of an activist, it's really important to hear and listen to these perspectives actually, because I think it would be remiss and very foolish of us to hope or not to be fully committed to the fact that this question is happening. These conversations are not just happening here with Ireland's Future and people who are coming to these meetings or watching online. This question is happening and people are talking about it. I was only over in London yesterday canvassing for the local elections, and people were talking to me about this question. So it is happening. There are people who are talking about it. And I think that what will be really important about that is, and I don't think anyone's turning away from it, but I think it's going to be really important for anyone who's involved in this question to ensure that the answers are found in our communities. That it is something that is people-led, it is community-led, because it is going to be all of our island, whatever happens. I think we were talking about this in the office earlier on, and we're like, how close do we think this question is going to happen? Like, do we think, when is it going to be put to the people? And I don't think it's a question of, is it going to be put to the people? I think it's going to be about when is it put to the people? And people are saying, they're like, gosh, within the next 10 years maybe. And that seems to be, certainly amongst my friend circle and the people who I was chatting to, that seems to be their firm belief that it could be within the next 10 years. And I'm sure for some people that seems like a lifetime. But 10 years is not a huge amount of time to solve what is a complex question, because I don't think any of us can stand and say that it is just a question of the national question, which side you fall on, where you go, who are you going to vote for? This is a question about, as is very aptly named in this organisation, our future. And I think very often with referendums, they're not always about the question that's on the paper. And I think for this particular issue, it's going to be so important that vision is laid out. What is going to happen on the other side of this? And we've been through a couple of referendums in the past, certainly very closely in Ireland's past, and they were contentious and they were hot and they were heavy, but people, I think, really, really got involved in them. People wanted to know what was going to happen on the other side. It wasn't enough for people to say, just vote this way and look, whoever it affects, it'll be grand. People were really, really invested on the answer as to how it was going to work, what it was going to look like, how it was going to affect healthcare, how it is going to affect children. And I think that's going to be something that will be really important if and when this question is put. What is going to be on the other side? So I think it's just something that we were talking a lot about. As Martina said, I'm the former president of the Union of Students in Ireland, and we have a really proud, we have had of this thing called the Trilateral Agreement, which came about in the 70s, which was where the Union of Students in Ireland and the National Union of Students in the UK came together to fund and support an entirely autonomous students' union, national students' union in Northern Ireland called NUSUSI. And that has been something that has happened, has been going on. The Trilateral is one of the most important things that people don't hear about students doing or student unions being involved in. And I think it actually has been one of the most important things that the student unions have been involved in for now over 40 years of this dialogue, this vision, this building a future, this not just talking about education, but how young people can be involved in society and what their society is going to look like. So I just said I'd throw that in there, that there's question, and this discussion's been happening in lots of different ways from young people. I'll wrap up very quickly now. I think it was really interesting when you mentioned that the architects of our current geographical layout are no longer with us. And if we were to do this, which is what we're doing exactly now, how would things look given the societal change we've had over the past 100 years and very recently, given the geographical, the demographical change that we've had? How would that have been done? And the last thing I think I'll just very quickly say is we have talked a lot, I think, and particularly people on the democratic left or the social democratic side, about a new social contract and what either of our places can look like. And that's all about, housing and childcare and health and environment. And when we're having this conversation and these questions, the answer I think that we need to be very clear on the other side is, what are they going to look like? Because as I said, I don't think this question is going to be about whose side are you on. The question is going to be about, well, what is our healthcare system going to look like? How are we going to tackle climate change? What is our education system going to look like? And what way will this new island be for everyone to live in? So I think that's, I'm happy to answer questions. I don't want to talk on too much. My timer here is clicking away. But I'm looking forward to hearing from other people and what this is going to look like. Thank you.
So thank you there to Senator Annie Hoey. Our next speaker is Professor Seamus McGuinness, who's a research professor at the Economic and Social Research Institute in Dublin. Seamus is also an adjunct professor in the Economics Department of TCD, and he previously held posts in the Northern Ireland Economic Research Centre, Queen's University Belfast and the University of Melbourne. Welcome, Seamus.
Thanks, Martina, and thanks for the welcome. I know people really get eyes glazed over when they hear an economist is going to speak, but so I'll try not to cause you too much sort of pain. The first thing that I want to say is a disclaimer. The SRI, the remit of the SRI is to produce high-quality, independent research to advise policy, both in Ireland and at wider, and particularly at European level. We don't hold a political position, and we don't ascribe to any sort of economic ideology. So in terms of how I get involved in this work, and I have particular interest, I live in Bessbrook and I have for a long time when I wasn't in Australia, and I work in Dublin. I've worked in Belfast as an economist as well. But myself and my colleague in 2018 were looking at the situation and what was happening with Brexit. And it was quite clear to us, looking at data and trends, that really the Brexit vote had completely altered the political framework and landscape on both sides of the border. On the issue of a border poll before 2016, you didn't really hear much conversation around that. But if you look at the amount of articles, pieces of data, online discussions, debates since that Brexit referendum was ratified, the debate has exploded. So it was our view that there were demographics and demographic factors that made a border poll likely in the future, but it was our view that the political, economic and social fallout of Brexit was really going to make that and ramp the speed up in terms of which a border poll could occur. As Annie said, this could occur at any time, but I think as a result of Brexit, we're looking at a situation where it could have occurred in the medium term to, it could occur any time from the short to medium term. We just don't know when a border poll can be called. And even the mechanisms by which it can be called, it's pretty unclear. But what is also clear is there's lessons to be learned from Brexit. Constitutional change is hugely complex. It requires a massive amount of work in terms of giving people the information and the data that they need in order to make informed decisions. People need to know what the current situation in terms of north-south differences currently exist in terms of the education system, as Annie said, in terms of healthcare, in terms of social welfare, in terms of taxation. Then they need to know what is the world going to look like at the end of that process if we have a border poll that ratifies reunification. How is my world going to change in terms of my tax rates, the education that my children get, the health service that we access, so on and so forth. That takes a lot of work and a lot of information. So the work that myself and my colleague Adele Bergen began in the SRI was really to lay down the blueprint. What is the information that people need in terms of going to the polls in the first place? What will a new Ireland look like? What are the issues in terms of what people believe around the relative strengths and weaknesses of both societies? Are they actually true? And also, how will we transition to unity if a border poll is ratified? Because there's this belief, and we look at the subvention debate, so how much is subvention, which is the cost of running the North in terms of the, in excess of the tax receipts that come in. Well, really, that's a false narrative, because if you think about subvention, subvention believes that a border poll will take place on a Friday and unification takes place on a Monday. That subvention is set in stone, and this money will all transfer across to the Irish Exchequer. That's not how any sort of constitutional transition should take place. There should be a transition period that needs to be decided. Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? What are the factors that cause that subvention to exist in the first place? Can policy do anything to sort of affect that, reduce that, make that number positive? So at the end, we have a transition to unity that benefits everyone, North and South. All of that process takes a huge amount of time. Now, we are moving to a situation where there is lots more research being done on North-South issues. So when we began our work, we've seen the IRINS project, which is analysing and researching Ireland North and South. Yes, right, we're also involved in that there. That's through the University of Notre Dame and the Royal Irish Academy. There's been a vast number of papers produced in that. We produced one on North-South living differences, there's one on education, there's one on health. There's the work of the Shared Island Unit, which we're also involved in. So there's been a report published on North-South health differences. We're publishing one next month on North-South differences in education. So there is more and more, we know more and more about the differences in terms of how societies look and function, where they're effective, where they're less effective on both sides of the border. So the information gathering process is happening, but we still don't have it in a format that allows people to vote effectively. That job needs to be done by government. It is the role of government to make sure, to understand that there is a risk that a border poll can happen at any stage, and to begin the planning process. So the architecture in terms of the information that people need to vote effectively in terms of what the situation is now relative to the status quo in both societies and what a new Ireland will look like is there. Because Brexit has taught us what happens if you don't do that. We're all feeling the economic and social and political fallout of a badly formed referendum where there was no fact-checking, there was no documentation, people were able to lie, and we've seen none of these arguments that were pro-Brexit have come to pass. We can point to many negatives, and that's really what we need to avoid at all costs. And that's the game that we are in, trying to push the debate forward, argue in terms of the planning documentation that needs to take place, and think a little bit about if this referendum takes place, what is the most effective way that we can plan a transition to unity that benefits all of the people on both sides of the border.
So our next speaker is Tina Atchioja. She's Programme Manager with Navan-based Kultur, a community organisation that works with migrants, asylum seekers and refugees. Tina is a human rights advocate with 18 years of experience in the not-for-profit sector in Ireland and abroad. She has a track record in facilitating cross-cultural community dialogue, and she also has a master's in conflict studies. Tina.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to say a big thank you for inviting me here today. And it's an honor for me to be standing with all the expertise on the table and everyone standing here. My name is Tina Atchioja, as she said. And when I've been following the streams, the video, every event of the island's future that's been taking place, the one in Limerick. And one of the first things I just look at is Ireland's future. It's great for us as members of new community to also be part of Ireland's future. But the key thing, I think, for Ireland's future is to be community-led, whereby we all have input in it. It takes you and I to make Ireland a greater place for all of us. I envisage a whole island that will enhance diversity, inclusion, equity for new communities across all aspects of our society. We need looking at it and focusing more on our social inclusion measures. And that's why I said Ireland's future, it needs to be community-led. We need to take the community approach in doing this. I want to paint a picture of a new Ireland that I envision. Looking at a story of a migrant coming into Ireland. I'll call the migrant A. Coming into Ireland, A comes into Ireland. She's not met white people before. She doesn't understand the way the structures and everything work here. And she faces challenges. Some of the challenges she faces is language. She doesn't understand English. She can't speak it. She doesn't hear it. She can't write it. Then that leads to lack of access to employment. And even if she gets employed, she's going to go into a low wage and there will be insecurity. There's going to be discrimination. She's experienced discrimination in the workplace. Then she finds out that when she goes to the council, there is nobody that will understand her, or there's underrepresentation there of people from our community. We also have a lot on social isolation. There's no lack of support. So my vision for Ireland, for these new communities, which I'm also part of, is where new communities are welcome and we're supported from day one. Where we have specific dedicated units in each government department which provides services and access to developmental support. I know we have SICAP that looks after disadvantaged community, but I think that we need to do more. We also need to look at the civil servants. They play a vital role in representing the state and its citizens. I want a Highland where the civil service team will be diverse. We need to increase the numbers of new communities in the public jobs. We also look at participation, where more avenues for new communities to participate in our democracy structures, and for us to be part of the parties and also take part in the democracy structures, as in council, voting, and even as community-led, as in getting us into PPN structures. That's why I'm saying that it needs to be community-led. I love an Ireland's future should also seek to ensure that the deep-rooted inequalities and social injustice are addressed, so that in future times, the shortcomings of the society in addressing social economic disadvantage are not so apparent. It is incumbent on us as migrants to share our experience. I believe that when I mean community-led, it's also for us as migrants to share our experience of engaging in the community we live in. It is our hope that in hearing our experience and our perspective, what we experienced then, we're able to address some of the challenges and also to take into account our needs, our hopes, and ambition when formulating Ireland's future. Thank you so much.
Well, it was great to hear that from Tina. So last but not least from the panel, we have Deputy Ruairí Murchú, who's one of two Sinn Féin TDs for Louth. He was elected to the Dáil as a first-time TD in 2020. He's Sinn Féin's spokesperson on broadband and a member of the Oireachtas Transport, Communications and Climate Change Committee and the Oireachtas EU Affairs Committee. He has a master's degree in computing and he's a fluent Irish speaker.
Guramaigad Martina, agus Guramaigad Veleggas and Jeshach. The difficulty sometimes with being the last person to speak is that all the best points are generally made. And unfortunately, this is also one of these points in time when I have to agree with Fergus O'Dowd on nearly everything that he said.
Something wrong.
Yeah. It was slightly different at the beginning of the week. No, look, No, not yet. But it depends what I say, I suppose, at this stage. Look, I think it's brilliant that we're here. Sure, look what we're here to speak about. It's preparing for a new Ireland. And in fairness, I'm very glad Seamus is here because all the difficult questions can be put to him. But the fact is, he spoke particularly about preparations. We need the preparations to happen. I think a number of people, Annie spoke about the vision and the fact that the conversation is happening. Yeah, that's it. The genie's out of the bottle. Like, I think an awful lot of people in this part of the world would accept partition is not good, has not been good for anybody. It has been an abject failure. You only have to look at what's gone on in Westminster this week to see that any bad situation can always be made worse by a British government. But yeah, I would say that, wouldn't I? But anyway, we're talking about vision and we are talking about hope. But like I said, preparations are absolutely necessary. There is a huge conversation that's going on around this, even among all our political parties. No matter what happens actually in the Dáil floor or in any other forum, there's a significant amount of people of all political parties that are talking about we need to get the show on the road. They might have different views in relation to what happens. I know we have put out that we would like to see a citizens' assembly, and that's just a forum where we can have a conversation where all the stakeholders, that's nationalists, that's unionists, and in fairness, I think Tina made the point in relation to it's a very much a changed Ireland than the Ireland I grew up in, and we have to take those difficulties into play. And I can accept that Micheál Martin says a citizens' assembly is not a significant enough operation to do the business. I'm not agreeing with him, I will put on the record, but then he has put a lot of investment into this shared island unit and the shared island dialogue. Well then, I would like to see a very much expanded shared island dialogue. I don't particularly care what the forum is, just that the forum exists. We obviously have to do all those other parts, those significant pieces of work that Seamus spoke about in relation to how we trigger a referendum, what we carry out, and we need to make sure that the planning is done in the background. And yeah, there will be transition, and it's probably going to be a very different Ireland to what I would have imagined at 17 or 18 years of age, you know. But like, we have an opportunity. Fergus, in fairness, spoke about we all have contorted past. Like, there's bits of your family tree that you'd like to select, and there's other bits that you like to put to one side. Like, I had a member of my family who fought in the Boer War. I'm told he came back and worked in Dublin Castle. I am also told that he gave information to Michael Collins, but he may have waited well into 1921 before he did that. I had a grandfather who fought in the Tan War and the Civil War, and he had, that was my great-grandfather, and my grandfather, who is his son, probably didn't necessarily have the same outlook in relation to the Republican ideal. But that's the Ireland that we live in. We have an opportunity now to make good on what was lost at that particular time. And there was talk of attending Presbyterian services. I remember doing this myself when I was 9 in Belfast. And in fairness, I remember the story, and it was about how you have to be nice to your neighbours and accept that people have a different view. Now, the story and the analogy that was used related to Admiral Nelson, now I found it interesting at the time, but it probably tells another story. But look, we have an opportunity. This is happening. The conversation has happened. Brexit has almost introduced a level of, what would you say? It's almost added a level of steroids to the mix. So that's the place that we're in at this point in time. So I think we do need to set a date for a referendum. I was very much taken. At the EU Affairs Committee, we had Angus Robertson of the SNP. He's basically their spokesperson for Constitution and External Affairs, Cabinet Secretary, should I say. And he spoke about the SNP's plans. When they went to the people, they said they would introduce a referendum. The timeline in his head is 2023. Now, that could change the conversation in relation to what we are doing. But it just, if I needed proof, it's the fact when you're in the driving seat, the abilities and that you can enact. And here, I would be much happier that if we had the present government would make those steps, long before the time when hopefully we, from a personal point of view, we have a Sinn Féin government. And look, that's it. I think we all who are here agree that we want a united Ireland, but it's a united Ireland that serves all the people out there. It's a united Ireland where we have a better health service, where we deal with housing, where we look after all our people, where we ensure that the best level of educational attainment, and that we make up for the failures that have been made in these two states. I'll just finish on, we're in a very much changed world. There has never been a situation before, I think, where the issues of national sovereignty, occupation and internationalism have been brought to the fore. And I think we have a major opportunity here, and there have been major failings over many years, and I believe the people of this island can do a far better job. And that's unionists, that's nationalists, that's none of the above. That's all the new communities, and we can definitely do better than what is happening at the moment, which is still being hampered by a British government. And I know I went over time.
So let me pick up on a point that Ruairí made about the shared island unit. In December, Fergus, your leader is going to take over as Taoiseach, and he's going to take over the shared island unit. Will it be run any differently? Will there be an impetus to drive forward with it?
I think the question is probably, best directed at Jim Darcy, who's in the room there, Jim. He was hopefully be the Taoiseach's advisor. Just introduce yourself there, Jim. Stand up. Come on, Jim is too shy. He's a very shy man. He's a former senator and Fine Gael candidate as well.
So maybe you could answer the question and we could go to Jim afterwards if someone could get a microphone.
I will answer.
Up to him.
What I'm trying to say is that it's obviously the funding is there. There's 500 million at the moment. Obviously the question of matching funds, the question of the determination of this government, whoever, whether it's Micheál Martin or Leo is going to be Taoiseach or whoever. We're absolutely committed
but we
to
know
that.
Leo Varadkar is going to take over. We know that Leo Varadkar is going to take over in December.
But I don't see why you would question him, because he's been exceptionally clear on the North. He's been exceptionally clear on bringing this island together, North and South. And I think
he as in Micheál Martin.
No, I'm talking about Leo, obviously. Excuse me, I'm misunderstanding your question, but I think you asked about.
I guess I'm trying to understand how the shared island unit will
continue to work,
drive the conversation forward, take positive steps.
Okay, well, the money is there, first of all. It's the first time it's been there. You'll have an example in this constituency of the Narwater Bridge. Just to tell you about Fine Gael, like part of the work I do in Fine Gael, and we have a lot of members of our Northern group, and what we're doing is we're going up, we visit places like Derry, we met with with all of the people up there, the Chamber of Commerce, the Foyle Port, we spoke about investment, that, what should we be doing? We've been to Belfast, we've met with opinion formers there. So all the time what Fine Gael are actually doing are we're trying to bridge our knowledge, our lack of knowledge in the past in the north by meeting people up there, by listening to them. But the biggest problem of all is the one that's probably been avoided here tonight, is that there's a huge number of people in the north who don't want a referendum, and our job is to persuade them why and how we should do that. And I go back to the point that Francis made today about having an Oireachtas committee, can be our committee, where we would put a plan together that all parties in the Oireachtas, and indeed all members of Parliament in the north are entitled to attend, and most of them do, is to put our plans to the people through a joint Oireachtas committee, and to make the case. But it's not just, it's much deeper, and it's much more difficult than just, and I'm not being rude to anybody here about fixing a date. You've got to get the buy-in from the minds, from the people who don't want to be part of this, don't want to. And the truth of the matter is, as chairman of the Joint Oireachtas Committee, we've invited unionists to our meetings. They're entitled to come. They won't come to our meetings. They won't talk to us formally or officially. When we go up to meet with them, they won't meet us formally. They might meet us in a side room. So what I'm trying to say, there's a huge gap there. It's a huge gap of trust between unionism and nationalism. And it's our job, and my job in Fine Gael, and Leo's job, to try and bridge that gap by making the best efforts we can to understand their position, to meet with them.
Are you confident that the gap can be bridged?
Well, I mean, it's something I've been working on. It's what I've found when I go up the north, whether it's to Belfast or Derry, what I find is people are delighted, first of all, to meet people from the south. And I think the first thing we need to do, and I'm talking about all of us in the south, is to political parties to go up there to meet people. You cannot put a measure of the importance of that, of interaction with the community groups, with Wave Trauma, with people in Ballymurphy, with people in Spring Hill, with Chambers of Commerce, with all of these. That's where it's at. So that people realise that everybody respects each other, and that our future has to be together. But it's only if people buy into it. We had a meeting recently with the House of Commons Committee on Northern Ireland in the Oireachtas, and a member of the DUP did attend. And in fairness to them, but their point was that they feel threatened. They feel threatened in their identity by what they think they're hearing. And I think we've got to make sure that we don't threaten them, and that their identity is as important and as sacred to them as nationalism is to us. And the new Ireland has to recognise both of them equally. That's our challenge. And it's a difficult challenge, but that's what we have to do.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask the rest of the panel. Is there outreach with unionism within your organisations? Annie, what's the prevailing weather in Labour, prevailing political weather?
Well, Jed obviously is based in this constituency here, and he would be. We would have links through different political
these
groupings.
people aren't on the panel. I need to hear.
Well, I'm just. He has been for a long time leading this within our party, very much in the background. Actually, has been doing his own work with communities. Obviously, we have links with some political parties in the north, SDLP in particular, and I think we haven't necessarily been as on top of it as we could have been. Rory mentioned
nobody
that
quite knows what Labour's position is on unity.
Yeah, well, I think our position is that it will be put to the people, and we will support that. And we have been engaging in a lot of dialogue over the past couple of months. I'm on a group of regular Joe citizens from north and south that's been set up by a group of activists in the north that I now sit on. And every couple of weeks they come together, and there's different people, and there are unionists also attending those meetings and having just very regular dialogue. A dialogue seems to be the word that a lot of people are using around this, and that's not something I would have ever been involved in before. I don't know that we as a party would necessarily have been involved in that before. And I think, as someone had said, 2016 brought this question very much to the fore, and I think a number of parties have had to step back, reflect, and go, actually, we need to get to grip with this. And I'm not going to hide behind that. I think there are individuals who've been working on this for a long time through their own community channels, through their own community organisations, and I think there is now a shift within our own party in terms of actually we need to collectively engage in this, and it's not good enough to leave it to, you know, Jed doing his cross-border work that he does, or to individuals themselves.
So this is Deputy Jed Nash you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah.
Seamus, you said in your presentation the modelling is being done by academics, by IBEC, by different organisations, but politicians have to step up to the plate. There has to be a set of political structures. Are you seeing that happen?
No, not at all. I don't think so. The research that's been undertaken is quite desperate. You know, it's the Ireland's project is undertaking certain sets of questions. Obviously, the Shared Island Unit, others, but it's quite scattergun in nature, and that's not what people need. People need a document like the Scotland's Future document that was published prior to IndyRef by the Scottish Government, 640 pages. Laid out exactly what the issues were, where the pros and cons were, what a new Scotland would look like in terms of monetary policy, fiscal policy, industrial policy, welfare, taxation. And having a document like that has been fact-checked and has a rigorous process underlying it, has a number of benefits. Firstly, people know what they're voting on. But secondly, and most importantly, you can't stand up and just tell lies. Politicians can't get up and promise the moon or say things that are just demonstrably untrue and they know to be untrue, as was the case with Brexit. So it's important from a couple of perspectives in allowing people the information so that they can vote in an informed way and not have regret afterwards. Allowing them to know exactly what to expect following if a referendum is ratified. And thirdly, keeping the debate honest. And that is why this is important. So there needs to be a number of strategies of this. I mean, Fergus did talk around the fact that unionism needs to be engaged. But the reality is that unionism doesn't have a veto in this situation anymore. You know, there's 40% ascribed to unionism, 40% nationalist, and now there's this 20% in the middle that don't ascribe to anything. But that group in the middle would be more predominantly likely to have voted against Brexit. That group in the middle see themselves as being disenfranchised as a result of Brexit because they've been dragged out of the EU against their will. And that group in the middle will determine the outcome of this referendum. And they will be looking at that information and making their judgments on that rather than emotional sort of the way that nationalism and union will vote along standard ways.
Bread and butter issues. It'll
be around
service,
education, health service, yeah, those issues, and taxation.
And what's your modelling showing there? You've done work on health, for example, outcomes north and south of the border.
Well, first thing to say is that we need investment in the modelling. We need a proper model built that we can model the North. There is actually no macroeconomic model of the North's economy. And there's none that speaks to our model. A model of that nature is now being built in the SRI. So, and it is still some way off. It's 2 years before we'll have that tool. And it'll be up to the government to determine how that tool is used. But as I said, we do know a lot more about North-South differences than we did before the Brexit debate. And I'll bore you a little bit about stats, but if you had asked anyone in 2015, will there be a border poll, will it be passed? They would have said no, because living standards in the North are much higher than the South. The health service is superior in the North than the South. The education services is superior in the North than the South, and it's unaffordable. And actually, when we did the research and started looking at these issues, we found when it came to the economy, depending on what metric you used, most reliable one would be household disposable income is 12% higher in the Republic than it is in the North. It's 30% higher than if we look at wages. The incidence of poverty is 15% in the North. It's 9% in the Republic. So that was one sort of myth that was dispelled very quickly when we looked at the data.
Was life expectancy an issue?
Well, that wasn't something we looked at initially. The next thing we looked at was education. We found actually there's big gaps in education attainment between the North and the South. 11% of young people in the North attain the two lowest levels of education. 11% in the Republic, that's 30% in the North. In terms of graduates, the two highest levels of education and post-secondary, that's 60% achievement in the Republic, 40% in the North. The rate of early school leaving was 2 to 3 times the rate of the Republic. Again, that was shocking stuff. So again, that's dispelled. The education system in the North works very well, but it works very well for a small proportion of people. That's the reality. When it came to the health service, again, the argument was, well, the health service is the gold standard, and people won't want to give that up. What we've seen over the last 10, 15 years is there's been a big convergence between the both health systems. That's because of the effects of austerity in the north and because of higher spending in the Republic. Spending per head on health is now around 30% higher in the Republic than it is relative to the UK average. When we looked at issues around waiting lists, they're higher in the north than they are in the south. There is the issue that the north does have free access to GPs services, but 40-45% of people in the Republic also have that. The problem with access to free GP services in the north is that 27% of people wait more than a week to see a GP, whereas it's instantaneous in the south. There's big problems in both health systems in terms of social care and acute bed occupancy rates, really big problems, and in terms of waiting lists for outpatient care. I think for 1 year it's 41% in the Republic, 53% in the north. So there's big problems in both sets of jurisdictions when it comes to health. But when you look at sort of the impact of the economy, the impact of education, and the impact of the health service, then you look at metrics such as life expectancy or infant mortality to actually see how those things are affecting everybody's well-being. And what we see around 2000, if you looked at life expectancy at birth in the north and the south, they would have been around the same. 2005, infant mortality would have been around the same. But now we see that a child born in the Republic today will live 1.5 years longer than a child born in the north. The infant mortality rate, which is the number of children that die under 1 per 1,000 live births, is 40% higher in the north than the Republic. Now, this is not to use statistics to batter the north. This is the reality of where we are at, and that as more information comes to light, I think that a lot more myths around are going to be busted. The final point is around the subvention. That's an estimate. That's the cost of how much it costs to run the north.
So it's usually quoted as 11.6 billion
in euros.
In euro, yeah, 9 to 10 billion.
9.2 billion sterling. But again, when you look at that, you start stripping out. Not all of that will come across in the event of a border poll. So a quarter of it goes away, but that's the money that's spent on the north's share of servicing UK debt and their defence spending, running their embassies. Then there's another 3 billion on pensions. That's more debatable. That's something that's for negotiation. But depending on how negotiations go, subvention could fall to just over 4 billion to around 7 billion a year. Professor John Doyle believes this could be as low as 2 to 3 billion.
Professor John Doyle
From
of DCU has been talking about it this
yeah,
week.
He's written a paper as part of the Orange Project. The bottom line is government spending, the size of the state in the Republic prior to the pandemic increased routinely by 2 to 3 billion a year. That's about the lower bound of that subvention estimate. It's not going to break the state. But the bottom line is, why do we have subvention in the first place? It's because the North's productivity is so low. So the need for subvention is something that can't be fixed if we have the proper transition period and the proper policy tools that are targeting low productivity in the period up to the point of unification. So subvention is not something that's set in stone. It's a symptom of economic failure. It's not a fixed cost.
Mm-hmm. Good. Tina, can I ask you about Irish identity in this new and reimagined Ireland we're talking about? Do we incline towards too exclusive a definition of Irishness, and how could we expand it?
Irishness, identity, because when you now look at the second generation of Irish children born by the migrant, there's identity crisis because you are Irish, but you're not accepted in the community as Irish. A lot of them are still experiencing people identifying them from their parents' nationality. So there's identity crisis there. But what Irishness means to a lot of people depends on their experience. And like I said earlier, that's one of the ways for us to see a shared island or island's future is to hear more of our experience, then the future will be able to address our needs and our hopes, especially now that we have the second generation and they're growing, they're working, they're in the community, they're your children's friends, so they're just close to you, the closeness. So when we look at Irishness, for me, most of the time, it's when I'm traveling, I remember I'm Irish. Because it's the challenges you face most of the time makes you not think you're Irish. So when you're traveling to countries that you don't need visa, and that's what a lot of people from our community say as Irish.
And what role can these new Irish play in shaping a different state?
One of the roles that we always, that is key to this island's future is to be more inclusive. Social inclusion is number one, and that's one of the things we look at. That's why I said it's community-led. It's when your neighbor make you feel accepted, then you're able to participate. You're then also representation of the new communities in the structures, in decision-making system. So when the representations are there, then you see that when we're represented in decision-making structure, the person that is representing the new community understand what their issues are. So we don't expect every other person to understand what the issues are, and we understand that there's a lot of issues in the community itself, but representation goes a long way. In that.
Great. Ruairí, how would you ensure a seamless transition if unity was voted for in both parts of the island? How would you bring about moderate unionist buy-in, and what protections would there be for unionist and British identity?
Well, I'm not sure it's going to be up to me to deliver all that.
Party.
You know what I mean?
Your party.
No. I accept that. Look, it's the stuff I spoke about earlier. Like, the fact is, we need to get these preparations properly underway. Like, this is a brilliant event. It's brilliant, the fact that Ireland's Future are doing a lot of these, but the heavy lifting really needs to start happening from the state. And it's the academic pieces of work. It's coming up with the idea of that Scotland's Future document, that here's exactly what we're talking about, and it's going to be, there'll be plenty of due diligence done on it in relation to the pros and cons.
What about the protections for unionist identity?
Well, like, I think in fairness, like, that's the idea of having a citizens' assembly or a forum, whereas you want people to express, well, what they think their fear is going to be. We all accept that a modern day 32 county United Ireland is going to be a modern pluralist democracy. It's not going to be the reverse of what the northern state was. Whereas it was a Protestant parliament for a Protestant people, and it had in what they believed was an inbuilt majority that fell apart. And I suppose if we're talking about, people's heritage, if we're talking about their culture, I don't see that there will be any difficulty. You can use those simple examples of Orange Men in Rosnowla. And within the confines of a united Ireland, I think you will have taken an awful lot of the sting out of an awful lot of those situations anyway. But we can have the argument, we can have the conversation on transitionary setups and anything that there needs to be, because I get, if a referendum happens, that it's not necessarily that we have a 32 county state and we have a parliament the next day and we have a single education system and we have a single health system. Now, we need to have the planning done in relation to that, but I don't think we're necessarily going to deliver it straight away. So I think we do the planning pieces that we can offer people the roadmap and we can have the conversation. that those that want to have the conversation can come in and express what fears they have, and we can look at ways and means of alleviating those.
So that's the role of a citizens' assembly, really, isn't it? It's a way of dealing with thorny issues.
Completely, and I think it needs to be expansive. I think it needs to be considerable. It probably needs to be to meet in what, and whether it's a citizens' assembly or another forum, it probably needs to be a bigger entity than some of the citizens' assemblies that have happened and have dealt with, difficult, thorny issues, but, smaller than Irish unity.
But there doesn't seem to be very much interest in having a citizens' assembly on this subject. I mean, we've just heard very recently there'll be one on mayors for different cities, there'll be one on biodiversity. No doubt these are important issues, but
and we've been waiting, and a number of us have been waiting for one in relation to the drugs crisis and all the rest of it. And I know people will make the argument sometimes around citizens' assembly, it's a cop-out by politicians, so they don't have to make the decision themselves. But we've a good history here in relation to citizens' assembly, that between experts and the regular people out there, that they can come to a place. You take almost the hot air of politics out of the equation.
So this would be a priority of your party?
Oh no, it's certainly a priority. Like, I don't think anyone's going to die in shock of me saying we want a date set for the referendum. That doesn't have to be next week. We're talking about a couple of years lead in that gives the time for all the preparations. And again, a referendum, it's democratic votes that, you have to win the argument.
So Annie mentioned 10 years. What's your preference?
Well, I would prefer if we set a date for in around 5 years. I suppose sometimes you think within the lifetime of a government.
Yeah, within. Fergus, how do you feel about the 5-year time frame? And can I also ask you about the British and Irish identity issue, because I saw you nodding when we were talking about safeguards for unionist identity.
Very much so. Let's be very practical here. I'm chairman of the Oireachtas Committee. I make approaches to the First Minister in Northern Ireland, and he won't meet with me or my committee, and he won't acknowledge our interest in meeting. That's a fact. The other side of that is that as a Fine Gael TD and chairman, I went to Derry, and we got a wonderful reception from a DUP mayor of Derry, and Derry is a model of equality and fairness and balance, and it seemed to me a place that suffered a lot, and yet at the same time they have a very good relationship with each other there. It doesn't matter when you set the date for the referendum. What you have to have is the change of heart, that people will want it. Seamus says that 40% of unionism don't have they can't stop the march of a referendum. They can't, absolutely not. But if you can't bring them on side, if they don't want to come in, if they resist every step of the way, it's not going to be a united Ireland, it'll be a disunited country. What we have to do, and I genuinely believe in this, is we have to, and everybody I talk to, it's meeting you talk about a citizens' assembly, it's about meeting the citizens. It's about going up there. It's about Fine Gael, Labour, Fianna Fáil, everybody in this room, the GA, the soccer clubs. Let's work with each other, get to know each other, get to meet each other.
Why don't you run in elections there? Why don't you run in elections?
Well, I mean, I don't have a problem running elections anywhere, but the question is, you talk about Fine Gael. Yeah, we've made a decision. We've made a decision as a party to get members in the North, associate membership of our party, but we're leaving it to the parties up there right now to make their decision on it. But that doesn't mean that we don't have ideas and we don't have beliefs. And our belief is absolutely fundamental, that the rights that we're talking about for everybody, they go back to long before 1916 and 1922. They actually go back to, as it happened at the time, the Presbyterians in the North in the 1790s, the Church of Ireland people in this country who brought the Enlightenment to our country then, the French ideas of liberty, equality and brotherhood. That's really what we should be on about. And it's by building on those links, by showing that we care, that everybody is equal, and by really, with our hearts and our minds, I don't, your referendum won't be a problem, but fixing a date doesn't mean anything if you haven't got your plan. Fixing a date, you don't want to lose a referendum. If somebody wins, somebody loses, right? And if it's a one vote, like a Brexit referendum, you're going to have a huge number of disaffected people. So you've got to have a message, and that's our job. That's our job in government, and that's what the Shared Island is doing. That's why you've had all of these, I think you have over 1,000 voluntary groups have met with the Taoiseach and with, online and at different functions.
Sometimes, though, it seems a bit St. Augustine, make me good, but not just yet. I'm going to throw it open to the floor now. Does anyone have questions for the panel? And we have a roving mic. Great. If you're representing an organisation, can you identify it, please?
I will indeed, Martina. Long time no see. Ken Murray is my name. I cover Ireland for Euronews. And I spent 17 years in Leinster House, so I know a little bit about politics. And Annie, if it makes you feel good, I'm from Duleek, so we have two Meath people in the room, so we're brave people. I spend a lot of time up north doing reports on Brexit and trying to explain its complex, breakdown to audiences in France and Italy and so on. And you've all mentioned that the conversation is underway. I would put it to you that the conversation may be underway in the south and certainly may be underway within the nationalist community in the north. It's not actually underway within the unionist community. And from my experience of spending a lot of time up north, there is a cohort of people that will ultimately decide on a united Ireland, and they are the middle-class Catholics. And the middle-class Catholics that I've spoken to, when they look south, the view is not a pretty sight. What they are seeing is housing at a level where it's beyond the reach of young people. And a lot of middle-class people in the north are saying, why should I vote for a united Ireland if my young Johnny or Mary can't afford a house?
You're talking about Dublin specifically, are you?
Well, the Republic, right? And they look at car insurance. It's the second highest in Europe after the Netherlands. There's a man who I think should be on the panel tonight, because I think when he was in the Senate, he offered a very broad perspective, if you like, from both sides of the border, and that's Ian Marshall. Ian Marshall appeared on BBC Northern Ireland recently, and he came out with a statistic that will ultimately determine the way people think. And he said that working class Protestants in Northern Ireland have annual disposable income of £16,000 per year, but a Catholic working class person in the south only has disposable income of €2,000. These are his figures, not mine.
Now, Ken, Seamus has different figures. Can I bring him in here?
I'm quoting Ian Marshall, but the point I'm making
Seamus is, in fairness, a professor of economics.
Those figures were widely
but he's
disputed.
not a professor of economics.
I'm quoting Ian.
Yeah, but I'm quoting the OECD, if I may, Ken. So household disposable income, after you account for price differentials between the two regions, is around $14,000 higher in the north than it is in the south. This is about a 12% differential. As I said, those statistics don't hold up to our statistics have been through peer review. So we have a number of statistics. If we look at GNI star per capita, which is GDP, which strips out the distortions of the national accounts, the difference is 50%. If we look at this household disposable income, which is after taxation, after social welfare transfers, it's a 12% advantage. Wages is around a 30% advantage on average in the Republic. And also the OECD statistics on housing costs as a proportion of household disposable income are similar across both jurisdictions. And this is statistics that we published in our paper in Irish Studies in International Affairs, which was peer-reviewed and published last year. So there is a debate around statistics, but it is also important that there is rigorous peer review associated with it, so that people can trust actually This is a government process. This has been fact-checked by academics, fact-checked by civil servants, so that we do have a balanced debate. And indeed, unionists do need to engage in this debate. But at the moment, the reactions that I've had, any work that I've done, is to sort of just dismiss me or dismiss people like me that are engaging in the work, dismiss the question's validity in the first place, rather than make a case for the union. And as I said, they can do that for so long, but ultimately it's going to be a self-defeating process, and that's my view on it.
Sure. Well, I'm just quoting Ian.
Sorry, I'm going to go to somebody else, Ken.
Okay.
If there's time at the end, we'll gladly come back to you. Does anyone else have a question? And then we'll go here, please.
I'm probably a wee bit unusual tonight in the sense that I come from the north. Come from a place called Carrickmore in the middle of Tyrone, from the mountains. And I can tell you 100% that the main issue is fear. It isn't actually about pounds, shillings and pence. It's about fear. When we heard in our community about Brexit, we're terrified. Holy God, does that mean the bloody border's back? We're going to spend 4 hours trying to get across the bloody border again. And Fergus talked about being at a funeral in Belfast. In 1 year, when I was in education, I attended 27 members of people shot dead who were connected with the security forces. I held a young girl that worked for me, that her husband was shot dead the week before. So I know what fear is like. And the bottom line is, Brexit brought fear to us all. Fear, on the one side, the unionists were thinking, we'll get the border back. And the rest of us were thinking, God almighty, surely we're not going back to that again. And it's shocking, in my opinion. The Irish government, I have to say, done a great job in working to make sure that the European Union made sure that we didn't have a border again in Ireland. And I have to say, everybody, political parties, the lot, done a great job. And this forum is absolutely wonderful to have this forum in this debate. And I absolutely admire the people that have driven this on. But what I will say to you is, we have to address the fear. And the unionists are afraid. But we're never going to change that unless we provide the answer for them, because they don't have an answer. They never had and they never will. And for Micheál Martin to say that he's going to wait and whatever, or any of you, I'm saying you've got to lead it. We led it on the Good Friday Agreement and we got an agreement. We led it on a ceasefire and we got a ceasefire. And we have to lead it in relation to an Ireland for all, or it'll never happen. And if the Irish government don't understand that, it never will be. And that should include our friend here, black and white and everybody else, where it's legislated for that they're not in fear, because it's driven by fear, not by simple economics or anything like it. It's much more than that. And I'm speaking, as I'm sure you would know, from a passion of having grown up with fear.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a question for the panel?
Yes, sure. I'm here as an
Please.
individual, by the way. What factors, Brexit aside, everyone's mentioned Brexit as a factor here. But at the end of the day, you're going to be looking for votes. If your contention is that you do want a new shared Ireland and you do want the people of the North to vote in favour of it. So, as I say, Brexit aside, what else has influenced your thinking? Now the time is right to go forward with the discussion and debate around a new Ireland.
Okay, Annie, do you want to take that? And then maybe I'll go to Ruairí as well.
Yeah, the question is, what are the other factors about what makes this the right time? Sorry, just so I don't understand. Well, I mentioned around, and I think it's really interesting, the figures that you were giving and the facts that you were giving, were ones that were a surprise
You've
to me.
talked around social inclusion as well.
Yeah.
And the, New Ireland in that sense.
Yeah, and I think, and it's been mentioned a couple of times around what, I don't know, I'm not happy with the state of play of where we are in Ireland right now in terms of housing, in terms of what we're doing about the environment. And I think, I couldn't and I can't speak for people in the north, but I think when people are unhappy with the state I think there is a massive unhappiness right now with the state of play. And I think I mentioned that the referendums aren't always on what the question is about. They're very often a vote of confidence in the government of the day. And I think that this will be beyond, the idea of a flag or whatever it is, and short slogans. It's going to be about this dissatisfaction. It's coming at a time where we're coming off the back. It's going to come relatively close to a global pandemic, whether it's in 5 years or 10 years. There's been an enormous global shift. I think there's been an enormous societal shift in both North and South, and I think those are going to be the things that people want an answer to. I think if we had had this question 10 years ago, we would have been discussing something entirely different. We wouldn't have had repeal in the Republic. We wouldn't have had marriage equality. We have a situation where you don't have in the North women having access to reproductive health care. So I think those questions of the society that we want and I think there's just a lot of anger at the moment.
And you came up through the Students' Union movement, so you're quite conscious, I suppose, of what young people think.
Yeah, and I think young people want a better island, and I think I could, as I said, we did a bit of work with students in Northern Ireland. They want a better future. And I think if this question isn't able to provide an answer as to how it will create a better future, I think we're going to find ourselves, and if we're campaigning, a government usually wants a yes vote, I think we're going to find ourselves in a really sticky situation if we can't give a very clear vision for how this is going to make things better for people. It can't just be a question of land mass. It has to be a question of how this can make this island better for everyone. And I think those are the questions. If we don't deal with housing, environment, health, and I thought your thing around the health was incredibly interesting, that we're technically spending more, and yet the prevailing debate I have heard is that we couldn't possibly lose the situation with the NHS in the north. So how are we going to make things better? How is this island, across the island, going to be better? And that'll come into all of those social issues. So, sorry, I'm kind of going around. I think people are angry and people want better. And if we can't say how it's going to be better with this, then I think we're wasting.
So it's better
I'm not
outcomes.
dismissing it. We're wasting our time putting it to the people if we can't give them a better option.
It's better outcomes for everyone. Ruairí, how would you deliver better outcomes in a united situation?
That's a United Ireland with a single Sinn Féin government. That's obviously no difficulty whatsoever. No, look here, we all accept that housing, healthcare isn't where it needs to be. We, like every other political party, have a plan that we will put before the people in relation to changing that. I think we really need to have these conversation pieces, so the sort of stuff that Seamus was talking about, and whether it is the information from Ian Marshall or somebody else, that it's all thrown out and it's taken apart, and we have a real conversation in relation to where things are really at. But I think, and in fairness, I don't want to ding dong with Fergus. I just don't think we can wait on the moment when the last person in the DUP is happy to join a United Ireland. I don't think that's viable in any way, shape or form. I think, in fairness, there are certain people in unionism are of a particular opinion. I and others are of a particular opinion, and we're probably not for changing in relation to that. But I don't think anyone has anything to fear from a referendum and for a conversation. But the big thing is the government has to do those pieces that it has the power to do. And that's ensuring that all the funding that's necessary for the type of work that Seamus is talking about is put in place, that the forum, the Citizens' Assembly, be it whatever anyone wants to call it, is in place. The conversations are had. And in that setup, people will realise that there is the possibility of change, and people will have a conversation in relation to what they'll want to see. There will be people who will vote against the United Ireland, but who might be reasonably happy to live with it if they believe that they will be protected, if they believe what we're going to offer them is something better. And we don't even know. I spoke earlier, and I wouldn't be putting all my hopes on it, but you could be dealing with a situation of Scottish independence in a very short period of time, and that, in my head, to a degree, is that's the end of the union. I'm not even sure where unionists psychologically will sit on that. Now, I have no doubt there's a percentage that are absolutely committed to the union come what may. But I suppose part of the work that we all have to do, or I would myself, is a piece of outreach, and even those people who will disagree and will want maintenance of the union, that they will see that the United Ireland I'm talking about isn't something that they have to greatly fear.
Yeah, though fear isn't logical, is it, Tina? You deal in conflict resolution. How do you address fear that's deep-rooted, whether or not it's logical?
My experience and talking from my background as a migrant, living here in Ireland for almost 25 years, I think we need to have the difficult question. There's some difficult conversation that needs to be said. We need to sit down and know that these are difficult conversations. It's not something that we have to be comfortable and looking for an atmosphere where those difficult conversations could be made. Because when you hear about fear, yes, there's fear. When you're socially excluded, when you're not included, when you're facing discrimination, when you're low paid, when there's housing crisis. So there's fear in the community, and there's fear within our own community. So I think we need to have the difficult conversation.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the floor? Yeah, we have lots of questions and not too much time.
Sure.
Someone has the mic, and then over there, and then if we have time here. So maybe quick questions rather than statements, if you would.
I think we have a wonderful opportunity, those of us who are interested in abolishing the memory of past dissensions. We have a preamble to our constitution at the moment, which is suffused with Catholic, irredentist, dogmatic language. I think we have a brilliant opportunity to change that text for two reasons. First of all, it's worth doing in itself. We could put a wonderful, beautifully poetic document, text, appealing to our better angels, as they say over in the States, okay? And that's good for us as citizens of this part of Ireland. But it can also encourage people up north to look at our state and look at what sort of state we're trying to build and what sort of hopes we can offer everyone on the island. Okay, we have a great opportunity with our preamble, and I would really urge everybody to read it at the moment. Read the language of it. Okay, and we can read. There's three people from the Oireachtas.
Okay, that's
here,
great. Look, you've made your point. I'm sorry, we're just up against time. I don't mean to be rude. Can we go to this? Yeah. And then there's someone at the back, is that right? And just, if I could urge you, a quick question, please, so everybody has a chance.
My own grandfather was a member of the 4th Northern Division, like Fergus is, I think. It's a question to Fergus, actually, and to Ruairí. Where do you see Civil War parties, if there is United Ireland after? Do you see it breaking into a right and a left wing?
I think, well, the so-called Civil War parties are coming together, so if that's a helpful answer to you, I think if everybody thinks on their family and on their community, and if you make your decision on your beliefs, you'll make the right decision, whatever that is. I think the gentleman about the new constitution, I agree absolutely with you. We need a new constitution. We need to define the relationship in a future Ireland for, do we want an assembly in the north or in a different, are there more counties, or, how do you work out a fair, equitable, balanced society? But to get back to the point, and I accept that Rory just mightn't have made it clearly enough, I'm not saying that the DUP will stand up and say no to the March of this nation. I'm never saying that. What I am saying, I want as many of them as possible to agree in a referendum that the new Ireland is something they can embrace. That's the difference. It's not us against them. It's us working together, totally committed to equality, fairness, and go back to the principles of the Enlightenment and the true republicanism, which is about, you know, respect for other people, respect for society. I don't want to go on
Thank you,
about this too
Deputy.
much.
Do we have any questions from any women, please? Yeah, thank you.
I would like to say that I'm really disappointed that there isn't a unionist on the panel tonight. We have we have 3 parties from Dublin represented, and nobody from Belfast, nobody from Derry, no unionist. And if it invited a unionist or two, we would have had they'd have all brought several people with them, and we could have a proper conversation with, our enemies. Anyway, I have a question, and that's about the referendum. Nowhere in the Good Friday Agreement does it say that the referendum has to be all Ireland, and yet everybody here assumes it has to be up in the whole island. But it doesn't, it just has to be in the 6 counties. I'd like opinions on that, please.
Okay, well, I don't think anybody regards unionism as enemies, political adversaries, perhaps, but I don't think anyone would see them as enemies. Does anyone want to come in here, Ruairí?
Well, I think it's obviously, in fairness, Ireland's Future ran this event, so I'm not their spokesperson. And I believe at a number of events there have been unionists. And again, there will be certain people who will feel comfortable at doing that. My argument would be if the state would get the show on the road, and whether it's a citizens' assembly or whatever, that the whole idea of that would be that you would have multiple sittings. You would have multiple sittings in the north, and you would try and get stakeholders of a unionist perspective. You would go out of your way. There needs to be serious work done in relation to this. In fairness, this is to a degree civic nationalism, and people who are interested, who have taken up their own time to put the likes of these public meetings in place. But we really need the state to do that piece of work. And let's be clear, there's obviously huge changes in unionism. Like the whole question about the Irish protocol, and there are significant amounts of unionist businessmen and unionist farmers that don't necessarily see that the unionist leadership is looking after their interests at this point in time. Now, all that we have is from our own interactions and, a fair amount of anecdotal, but look, Fergus will have that from government interactions, from the EU Commission's interactions. It's in relation to that particular issue, people are interested in delivery and a system that works, and they're not that particularly interested in what unionism has tried to do in the sense of wrapping the Union Jack round, the anti-protocol campaign.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. I should just mention that there are members of the unionist community who are members of Ireland's Future, from Stormont Trevor Lunn and the Reverend Karen Sutherman. There's an event online which is entirely composed of unionist contributors, and I'd urge people who are interested to listen. It's really well worth tuning into. We probably have time for one more question. Who has the mic? That's the, okay.
Good evening. Maybe a question that Fergus could maybe answer. We're all talking about a date for a border poll, and it could be put onto us at any time by the Secretary of State. Is there anything being done by the Irish government at the moment to find out what the concrete criteria is for a border poll of the British government? Thank you.
I think, Francis, we got the answer to that today. I raised that very point today with senior officials in the department, and my view is that it's a weakness in the Good Friday Agreement that it didn't articulate a joint decision on that, but a joint decision on the border poll that is left to one of the 2 independent states, shall we say, Ireland and Britain, to make that decision. But I think it was other people from other parties who said that it is their understanding that it will be an agreement between the Taoiseach and the Prime Minister of England that it is the time to take the poll, but that isn't what is written. And you're absolutely right, that is an issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Last question, and then we're going to wrap.
Very quickly, Conor Patterson from Uri. My concern is the immediate term, the fact that an obsession about identity absents the Irish government from actually doing anything about the North. And if an assembly and executive doesn't reform, what does the Irish government do in those circumstances? vis-à-vis its responsibilities under the Good Friday Agreement. So if you take Brexit, the protocol doesn't resolve Brexit. It's a deal on trade in goods, manufactured goods and raw materials. There's massive issues around mutual recognition of qualifications, trade and services, citizens' rights issues. And the Irish government can't defer all that for some far-off, distant decision on constitutional reconfiguration. It can take decisions now under the ambit of its national policy role that would make a real difference in making the island of Ireland a warm house for anybody, whatever their identity. So that's my concern. There's kind of partitionist thinking here that, you know, we can't do anything because the unionists might be afraid.
Who'd like to come in there? Yeah. Would you like to come in?
Sorry, I think that's fair enough what you said there. But the reality is that the people in the north will make that decision, all of them collectively, and the election that's coming, they'll have a choice in the unionists between more extreme and more moderate, on the nationalist side, and they'll also have the alliance. And I know, like from meeting and talking to all of those parties, I would hope that people will vote for continuity of an administration and for power sharing, because that's the only game in town. The only game in town is the Good Friday Agreement. It's about strengthening it, strengthening North-South, strengthening the executive, strengthening the East-West relationship. The biggest problem we actually have is in London. We have a government there who is not tuned in and doesn't understand, I believe, the Irish situation at all. And that's the biggest problem we actually have. That's why we got Brexit, and that's why we have this row over the protocol. And I think, so I think the people in the north will make that choice, and I have every confidence that they will make the right choice, because either they go to working together, strengthening the Good Friday Agreement, which a vote could mean, or chaos, which is what you're talking about.
Okay, unfortunately, we're out of time. We've had an in-depth and thought-provoking engagement tonight. We can see new arrangements for this island aren't some riddle which a scientist of the future will solve, like a cure for the common cold. As we've heard from our panel, the scaffolding of any new state needs to be put together by government intervention with input from citizens. So thank you all for coming, for your input, for your interest. Let's keep the conversation going. Can I remind you of our 3 Arena event coming up on Saturday, the 1st of October. It's going to be an unmissable event. Tickets will be released shortly, so do make sure you get a hold of some and tell your family and friends. Think about, if you're interested in this, joining our mailing list, offering assistance in any way you can, and join the conversation. Thank you to the panel. So, thank you all. And I hope I'm not being previous in saying that the panel will wait around for a while for people who didn't have an opportunity to ask questions, because look, this is about engagement. Let's engage.
They mightn't get answers, that's the only thing.